let's discover Patty Cannon. Patty's early life is kind of shrouded in mystery. We know she was born around 1760 as either Martha or Patricia Hanley, and that she was born perhaps in Canada and moved to Delaware at the age of 16. Later on, Patty married local farmer Jesse Cannon, and together they had 2 children and lived near Reliance, Maryland. Now, Jesse died of mysterious circumstances, and they believe Patty may have poisoned him. Wanting to make some quick cash, she tried her hand at being a sex worker and even wanted to open a brothel, but her negative attitude nixed that, and she ended up opening a tavern instead. While Patty's getting her life together, her daughter married a man named Henry Brereton, and he opened both their eyes to the world of crime, especially illegal slave trade. This was also known as the Reversed Underground Railroad, and what it was comprised of was the kidnapping of freed slaves or slaves that had escaped into free border states. Men, women, and children were being kidnapped and transported to southern states and sold at auctions or to plantation owners, and they were fetching $200 to $300 a head, and that was a lot of money back then. Now, back in Patty's world, a fight broke out in her tavern over a carriage between her son-in-law Henry and a slave trader. Henry ended up shooting the slave trader and was sentenced to hang in 1813. Now, there ain't no time for tears. Patty's daughter ended up remarrying Joe Johnson, and he became Patty's #1 accomplice. Now, Patty and her gang ended up killing a countless number of slaves. They also killed wealthy guests that entered the tavern so they could steal their money and their horses. Patty's crimes went on for 20 years because she was easily able to slip across the borders whenever she felt the police were near. Patty was arrested in April of 1829 and convicted of only 4 counts of murder. She was found dead in her cell a few weeks later on May 11th, 1829, of apparent suicide by poison. She was approximately 70 years old at the time.
Patty Cannon, born 1759, died May 11th, 1829, age 60. Sussex County Jail, Georgetown, Delaware. Cause of death, disputed, possibly cyanide by poison. Sussex County Jail Cemetery, Georgetown, Delaware. Later reburied in a potter's field near the same jail. Occupations: kidnapper, illegal slave trader, slave stealer, known for illegal slave trading, co-leader of the Cannon Johnson Gang of Maryland, Delaware. Criminal status: deceased. Spouse: J.C. Cannon. Children: 2. Criminal charge: unaliving. 4 counts. Details: victims: 11 confessed, 4 charged. Uh, wow, okay. Mayor, oh gosh, you guys, hold on. Okay, so there wasn't a lot on her childhood, but Cannon married local farmer Jesse Canyon, and they lived near what is now Reliance, Delaware, Maryland. Then she called Johnson's Crossroads on the border of Delaware at the convergence of Caroline and Dorchester counties in Maryland and Sussex County, Delaware. Jesse Canyon died around 1826. Patty and her husband had at least one daughter who twice married men known to engage in slave stealing and kidnapping. The daughter first married Henry Bertrand, a blacksmith who kidnapped free black Americans for sale into slavery. Barrington was convicted and imprisoned in 1811 for such kidnapping, but escaped from the Georgetown, Delaware jail. Barrington was captured, convicted of murder in another case, and hanged with one of his criminal associates, Joseph Griff. Sometime after this, Patty's daughter married Joe Johnson, who became the mother's most notorious partner in crime. Joe had a tavern a few miles from the Cannon house. Information about Cannon and Johnson has been confusing, with fact and fiction mixed. Johnson has been described as Patty's husband or son-in-law, and the Cannon Johnson gang included whites and blacks, among them Henry Carr and John Parnell, described as a yellow man or mulatto, who used several aliases. They served as decoys to get young blacks aboard their boat or close enough to take captive. Robert Barrington, a relative of Cannon's late son-in-law, also continued to be involved. with the gang at least until 1826. The U.S. Congress banned the importation of slaves in 1808 because of demand due to development of cotton culture in the Deep South and the spread of short stable cotton made profitable by invention of the cotton gin. The domestic slave trade became even more lucrative. The cash value of slaves shot upward, creating a strong incentive for kidnappers. By this time, many free black Americans lived in Maryland and Delaware, which were still slave states. As a result of manumissions after the Revolutionary War, in addition to mixed race families formed by unions between free white women and African men in colony Virginia. In addition, nearby Philadelphia, Pennsylvania had the largest population of free black Americans in the North and no professional police force in the antebellum years, with especially children, because they were more easily controlled, were at risk for kidnappers. At a time when Southern slaveholders came to the city with their slaves, it was difficult for onlookers to determine what was happening between adults and children, especially between adult black Americans and those who appeared to be their children when kidnappers used black accomplices. Patty's kidnapping forays control waterfront areas throughout the region, enticing young men aboard their boat to help decoy workers. The kidnapping of free blacks left their land and other property behind. The local white communities usually did not take action on behalf of free blacks if they learned of such kidnappings at all. But Philadelphia had an active mayor, Joseph Watson, a Quaker, who made concerted efforts on behalf of stolen free blacks with officials in Mississippi and Alabama, which included paying for gathering of affidavits, and in the case of Cornelius Sinclair in 1827, a white witness to travel to Alabama to attest his identity. Detailed accounts by kidnapping victims who regained freedom in 1826 were published in the abolitionist journal, The African Observer, published in Philadelphia in 1826. Though 1827, kidnapped captives were chained and hidden in the basement, attic, and secret rooms. In Cannon's house, captives were taken in covered wagons to Patty's Ferry, now Woodland Ferry. They were often put aboard a schooner traveling down the Nioke River to the Chesapeake Bay, from where they were shipped to Georgia and other slave markets. Some were taken overland for sale in Alabama and Mississippi. The gang's activities continued for many years. Local law enforcement officials were reluctant to halt the illegal operations and may have been afraid of the gang's retaliation or violence. When Patty learned the police were coming, she would slip across state lines away from local police forces. According to the deposition from victims who gained freedom and returned to homes in the North, Joe Johnson kept the captives in leg irons. He severely whipped captives who insisted they were free. To stop them from giving that account, his wife, Patty's daughter, was overheard saying that it did her good to see him beat the boys. Boy was a degrading reference to a black man of any age. Miss Johnson was not strictly referring to male children. Lydia Smith, a 25-year-old free black woman, testified that she was kidnapped in 1825 and kept in Patty's home before being moved to Johnson's Tavern. She was held there for 5 months until she was shipped south with a large lot of kidnapped free blacks being sold into slavery. The gang was initially indicted in May 1822. Joe was sentenced to the pillory and 39 lashes. Records show the sentence was carried out. Patty and several other gang members, though charged with Joe, apparently were not prosecuted. In the mid 1820s, Mayor Joseph Watson of Philadelphia and Governor John Andrew Schultz cooperated to retrieve kidnapped young blacks from Mississippi and to prosecute the Cannon Johnson gang. In 1826, Watson offered a $500 13,896 in 2024 reward for information leading to the arrest of members, and Schultz issued orders of extradition to the states of Virginia, Alabama, and Mississippi. That year, they aided most of the young free blacks kidnapped and sold in Mississippi. The year to gain freedom and return to Philadelphia, at least one had died of a beating. In 1827, after Cornelius Sinclair had been freed from slavery in Alabama, he was among witnesses to testify against Henry Carr and John Parnell, two members of the gang who were prosecuted and kidnapped free blacks. They were acquitted in Mayor's Court, and Carr left for Alabama, where he died in 1828. Parnell was also tried in the Philadelphia court, where he was convicted in Philadelphia on two counts of kidnapping and sentenced to a $4,000, $114,533 in 2024 fine and 42 years in prison. He did 5 years while incarcerated in Walnut Street Prison in the city. In 1829, bodies of four black people, including three children, were discovered buried on a farm property which Patty owned in Delaware. A tenant farmer uncovered their remains during plowing. In April 1829, Patty Canyon was indicted on 4 counts of murder by a grand jury of 24 white males: an infant female on April 26, 1822, a male child on April 26, 1822, an adult male on October 1st, 1820, a Negro boy on June 1st, 1824. The indictments were signed by James Rogers, an Attorney General of Delaware. Witness Cyrus James stated he saw Patty take an injured black child, not yet dead, out of her apron, but that it never returned. James, a mixed race mulatto man, had been purchased as a slave by Patty when he was only 7 years old. He had grown up in the household and participated in her crimes, sometimes serving as a decoy to make free blacks feel safe and working with him on a task. Patty confessed to nearly 2 dozen unalivings of black kidnapping victims and died in prison while awaiting trial. Patty died in her cell in Georgetown, Delaware on May 11, 1829, at an age estimated to be between 60 and 70. Sources differ as to whether she was convicted and sentenced to hang before her death. Shields asserted that she unalived herself. Other sources contended that she died of natural causes. The novel that she administered poison. Her body was initially buried in the graveyard of Georgetown, Delaware jail before that land was developed as a parking lot in the 20th century. Her remains, along with those of two other women, were exhumed and reburied in a potter's field near the new jail. Her skull was separated from the rest of her bones, lying in a pauper's grave or potter's field from a future parking lot was being excavated, and the skull was later put on display in various venues, including on loan to the Dover Public Library in 1961. It was loaned to a Smithsonian in 2010 to allow scientists to learn more about cellular life in Chickapeg. Why? It's a skull. How are you going to learn from that?